The Industrial Patriot, Episode 3. George Westinghouse, the industrial visionary who cared. By the Grumpy Veteran Project. In an era defined by unrelenting industry and rapid technological advancement, few individuals left a mark as deep as George Westinghouse. An inventor, a businessman, and a visionary, Westinghouse not only transformed the way we power our world, but also redefined the relationship between labor and industry. With his pioneering work on alternating current, he gave birth to the modern electric power industry, turning his factories into hubs of innovation that illuminated cities, powered industries, and changed lives forever. But Westinghouse's legacy extends far beyond his technical achievements. In an age when factory workers were often exploited, treated as little more than cogs in a machine, Westinghouse took bold steps to ensure that the laborers behind these monumental advances had opportunities for fair wages, better working conditions, and a pathway to advancement. George Westinghouse's story is one of balance, between brilliance in engineering and humanity in business, between innovation in industry and progress in labor rights. Born in 1846, George Westinghouse grew up during an era of rapid industrialization. As a boy, he was fascinated by the workings of machines, a fascination that would drive him throughout his life. His early years were marked by the pressures of a growing economy and the fast-paced changes taking place across America. In many ways, Westinghouse was a product of this time, a time when steam engines, trains, and the expansion of railroads represented the future. At 15, Westinghouse was already demonstrating an exceptional talent for mechanical engineering. In his teens, he designed and patented his first invention, the railway air brake, an innovation that would not only save countless lives, but also revolutionize the railroad industry, making him an industrial legend before he turned 30. His invention of the air brake was a huge success, providing a much-needed safety feature for trains by allowing engineers to apply brakes to each individual car, reducing the risks of accidents. Westinghouse's early successes fueled his ambition, propelling him into new fields, particularly the world of electricity. In the 1870s, he became captivated by the potential of electrical power, and in the years that followed, he would build an empire based on this new transformative force. But more than just the mechanics of power, Westinghouse saw electricity as a means to change society, a vision that extended beyond profit to a more inclusive and humane way of industrial progress. Westinghouse's vision for industry went far beyond merely solving technical problems. He believed in a progressive approach to industrial management, one that prioritized fairness and safety for workers, as well as profitability. His deep understanding of machines was matched by his understanding of people. As he expanded into the electric industry, Westinghouse's focus was not only on lighting up cities but also on lighting a new path for workers in industrial settings. His most famous achievement, the development of alternating current, or AC, was an invention that could carry electricity across long distances, allowing for the electrification of entire regions. But his true innovation wasn't just in the science of AC, it was in how he managed the workforce behind these innovations. Westinghouse firmly believed that business success didn't have to come at the expense of workers. He wanted to create an environment where employees could feel valued, respected, and empowered, where their dignity was part of the equation for business success. Westinghouse's commitment to workers was in stark contrast to the harsh realities faced by laborers in other industries during the same period. His factories were among the first to offer worker protections, fair wages, and shorter hours, all while fostering a spirit of cooperation between employers and employees. The Industrial Revolution, while it brought immense technological advancement, was also a time of great exploitation. The rise of factories across the United States and Europe created new jobs, but these jobs were often grueling, unsafe, and poorly paid. Workers, including women and children, were subjected to long hours in dangerous environments, with little to no regard for their well-being. The lives of many were defined by toil and hardship, as employers focused solely on maximizing profits. In this environment, George Westinghouse stood out. He was not blind to the struggles of laborers. In fact, his vision for industry was one of balance, creating an industrial ecosystem where technology and humanity could thrive together. Westinghouse was a man who understood that workers were not just tools to achieve profit, they were the foundation of industry itself. His policies included creating safer working environments, investing in the health and well-being of his workers, and ensuring that they had a chance to improve their lives. At a time when most industrialists were focused on production at any cost, Westinghouse's approach was groundbreaking, proving that fairness and productivity could go hand in hand, while the prevailing attitude of the time was one of exploitation, where employees were often seen as expendable labor. Westinghouse's philosophy was grounded in the belief that workers should share in the success of the business. This approach not only made him a progressive figure in business but also a pioneer in labor relations. George Westinghouse's commitment to innovation extended far beyond the electrical systems he was famous for. While his contributions to electricity were revolutionary, it was his approach to worker treatment that set him apart from most industrialists of his time. At a moment when factory work was synonymous with danger, long hours, and squalid conditions, Westinghouse took bold steps to ensure his workers were not only well compensated, but also well cared for. In the late 19th century, most factories were a far cry from what we consider safe or humane today. Workers were often subjected to 12-hour days in poorly ventilated, hazardous spaces. Accidents were frequent and injuries were common. But George Westinghouse was a man who saw the importance of not just profits, but the human beings behind the machines that generated them. He believed that the key to his business's success was ensuring his workers were healthy, motivated, and respected. Westinghouse quickly recognized the need for changes in his factories. One of his first steps was to implement safety protocols. Unlike the norm in many factories of the time where safety was an afterthought, Westinghouse made it a priority. He introduced safety features to reduce the risk of accidents, including proper guardrails on machines and safety equipment for workers. These measures not only protected workers from injury, but also created a culture of safety that permeated the company. While many factories ran on the principle of maximizing output at any cost, Westinghouse was determined to ensure that his workers could perform their tasks with greater ease and less risk. He introduced safety drills, ensured that workers were properly trained, and emphasized the importance of well-maintained machinery to prevent accidents. But safety wasn't the only improvement Westinghouse brought to his factories. His reforms extended to working hours and wages as well. While the typical workday in most industries at the time could extend to 12 hours or more, Westinghouse was one of the first to reduce the workday to 8 hours for many of his workers. This was revolutionary at the time, as the industrial norm was to keep workers toiling for long hours in the name of profit. Along with reducing working hours, Westinghouse also made sure his workers were compensated fairly. He was one of the few industrialists who believed that paying workers well was not only ethical, but beneficial for the business. By offering better wages than the competition, he not only attracted skilled workers, but also created a more stable workforce. His employees were less likely to leave for better opportunities elsewhere, and this stability allowed his factories to thrive. In addition to shorter hours and better pay, Westinghouse took steps to improve the overall working environment. Recognizing the negative effects of poor ventilation and cramped working spaces, he reimagined the layout of his plants. He introduced better airflow systems, making the air fresher and more breathable. This improvement not only reduced the risk of illnesses but also made the workplace more comfortable, which contributed to increased worker productivity. By introducing these changes, Westinghouse's factories were among the most advanced and humane of their time. Workers were given breaks, healthier environments, and the ability to feel a sense of pride in their work. In a time when most workers felt little control over their conditions, Westinghouse's policies gave them a voice. Westinghouse also understood that the well-being of his employees went beyond the factory floor. He introduced welfare programs that helped workers thrive not just in the factory, but in their lives beyond it. He built workers' housing near his plants, providing his employees with affordable and comfortable living conditions. These homes, equipped with proper sanitation and light, were a far cry from the overcrowded, unsanitary living quarters common in industrial cities at the time. Additionally, Westinghouse encouraged the development of cooperative programs, where employees could have a stake in the success of the company. He offered educational programs to help workers acquire new skills, allowing them to advance within the company. This philosophy of worker education not only empowered the workforce but also ensured that workers remained loyal and motivated. Westinghouse's commitment to his workers extended beyond just the job. His forward-thinking welfare programs reflected his belief that a well-cared-for workforce would be more productive, loyal, and ultimately beneficial to the success of the company. As the Industrial Revolution progressed, the early 20th century saw an increasing tension between factory owners and workers. Across the United States, workers began to organize, pushing for better pay, safer working conditions, and a say in the decisions that affected their lives. This rising tide of labor unrest would become a defining feature of the industrial age, and no company was immune to the pressures of labor movements. But amid this growing tension, one industrialist stood apart from the rest: George Westinghouse. Known for his commitment to the welfare of his workers, Westinghouse sought not just to run a successful business, but to foster an environment where both management and workers could thrive together. His approach to labor relations, which came to be known as the Westinghouse Way, was characterized by respect, communication, and an emphasis on preventing conflict. In an era when labor disputes often turned violent, Westinghouse became known for his efforts to negotiate and collaborate with unions. His goal was to find a balance between the needs of workers and the business demands of his company. Rather than viewing unions as threats, Westinghouse saw them as an essential voice in shaping the future of the workforce. The labor strikes of the late 19th and early 20th centuries were often characterized by conflict and violent suppression. Factory owners, faced with demands for better conditions, would frequently turn to police or private militias to break strikes, sometimes resulting in deadly confrontations. Westinghouse, however, sought a different approach. While his factories were not immune to labor disputes, he was known for being a voice of reason during times of unrest. Rather than relying on force to put down strikes, Westinghouse took an active role in engaging with unions and negotiating solutions. His emphasis on compromise and collaboration helped to prevent the worst outcomes of industrial labor disputes. In 1886, a significant strike took place at Westinghouse's Pittsburgh plant. This strike, in part over wages and working hours, became a key moment for Westinghouse. Rather than call in the police or use force, he met with union leaders to hear their grievances directly. Westinghouse's approach was simple yet rare. He listened. He not only acknowledged the workers' complaints, but also worked to find a resolution that addressed the key issues of safety and pay. His willingness to engage in meaningful dialogue with unions earned him the respect of many workers. His approach contrasted sharply with other industrialists, who viewed unions as adversaries to be crushed. For Westinghouse, cooperation was the way forward. He believed that a productive workforce was one that felt heard and valued. Westinghouse's approach to labor relations was more than just a company policy. It had a lasting influence on the broader labor movement. By engaging with unions and showing that a company could be successful, while still prioritizing the welfare of its workers, Westinghouse helped to pave the way for a more balanced approach to labor rights. His willingness to negotiate with unions helped to set a precedent for other industrial leaders. It sent a clear message that workers' rights could no longer be ignored, and that labor movements were an essential force for progress in the industrial age. Westinghouse's model became a template for future negotiations, and his example was cited by leaders of labor movements as proof that change was possible without resorting to violence or strikes. While Westinghouse's approach to labor relations was often seen as progressive, it was not without its challenges. In an era of rapid industrialization and unionization, the tension between business owners and workers would remain. But Westinghouse's ability to balance the needs of workers and the goals of his business created a model that would influence not only his own factories but also the future of American labor relations. By advocating for shorter workdays, fair wages, and safer working conditions, Westinghouse helped shift the conversation around industrial labor. His collaborative approach, while not without its detractors, played a pivotal role in shaping labor policy in the United States, leading to the eventual establishment of key labor rights that would become standard in the 20th century. Today, workers in many industries benefit from a range of rights and protections that ensure their well-being. Rights that were once thought of as radical. From health insurance to workplace safety standards, from paid vacation to the right to organize, these benefits are now seen as fundamental to modern labor practices. However, these benefits didn't materialize overnight. They were the result of decades of labor struggles, social change, and in part, the progressive leadership of industrial pioneers like George Westinghouse. Westinghouse, with his commitment to improving worker conditions, laid the foundation for labor reforms that would ultimately reshape the American workforce. In an era when the dominant view of industrial labor was exploitative and dehumanizing, Westinghouse introduced a new model, one that valued workers as essential assets to a company's success. His legacy endures today, in the form of the workplace practices that we now take for granted. Westinghouse's innovations in worker treatment had a profound and lasting impact on how industries treat their workers today. His progressive approach became the gold standard for companies that aim not only for profitability, but for long-term stability. By implementing fair wages, safer working conditions, and health initiatives for his employees, he was ahead of his time in recognizing that a healthy, well-treated workforce led to a more productive and loyal team. The policies he introduced in his factories, including shorter workdays, better compensation, and a strong emphasis on safety, have been replicated and built upon by industries around the world. Westinghouse showed that companies could thrive financially while also prioritizing the welfare of their workers. His approach to labor laid the groundwork for the labor reforms that would come in the early 20th century, from the establishment of child labor laws to the creation of workplace safety regulations, all the way to the unionization efforts that helped solidify workers' rights. His approach to labor relations laid the foundation for a corporate ethos that recognizes the importance of investing in workers not only as a moral obligation, but also as a business strategy. Companies today understand that a happy and healthy workforce is more productive, more innovative, and more loyal. Westinghouse's treatment of workers, viewing them as partners rather than tools, was revolutionary at the time and continues to influence how companies structure their relationships with employees. Today, workers have access to comprehensive health insurance, workplace wellness programs, paid family leave, and safety standards that have been institutionalized across industries. The work of labor unions, government reforms, and business leaders like Westinghouse who championed the fair treatment of workers helped forge the system of employee protections we know today. George Westinghouse's legacy is alive in the corporate culture of today. His innovative approach to worker treatment showed that the success of a company is inextricably linked to the well-being of its workers. His groundbreaking efforts in worker safety, compensation, and welfare laid the groundwork for the labor rights movements that followed. Today's corporate responsibility, with its focus on worker rights, safety, and fair compensation, owes much to Westinghouse's visionary leadership. The Industrial Patriot Westinghouse, Revolutionizing Industry and Labor. By the Grumpy Veteran Project.